Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. We are here today for some fun. We're going to talk about the most powerful deck in Magic history. All right, now, to make sure we're all on the same page, definitely not talking about something that's coming out on Arena, because the cards that exist on Arena versus the cards that exist overall in Magic, there's a huge power disparity. Although technically, the Lotus and some of the Moxes and stuff do exist on Arena now. So there is a little bit of that going on, but not enough power. So what's going on? I have been sent a copy of the deck. That is actually the name of it. That's how impressive this deck is. It is the deck. Edwin, the Magic Engineer, has challenged me to play him an old school game of 93-94. So he has sent me out a proxied copy of the deck. Now, when you look at this deck, I want you to keep something in mind. Edwin is a ridiculous human being, okay? So he sends me out this deck, and when you get things in the mail, there's a declaration of the value that you give to the post office, right? You say, the things that I'm mailing are worth X. So on the packaging, he wrote Magic cards, and Magic cards $75 or whatever. And I looked at it and went, 70, like each of these is worth $1. And then I actually took a look at the deck. And when we get into the actual unboxing, the looking at, I guess it's not really unboxing, but when we go through the deck itself, I will actually pull out the proxy so you can see. He thinks they're worth $1. He thinks they're worth $1. Which is not, Edwin, you can't charge for your time. And on a funny note too, he sent it in a deck box from Vintage Magic, but he valued this at $0. So I guess maybe that's what he values his friend over at Vintage Magic on. He's just like, no, he's not worth anything. Don't, that box, no. But anyways, how can you say they're worth $1 a piece? I'm just glad that there was no sort of like import fees. I would have lost it. When you guys see that, just picture the idea of paying import fees on Edwin just deciding cards he's printed out with proxy stamped on them are worth $1 a piece. Edwin, you're a maniac. So, in terms of the deck itself, what you need to know is the idea behind it is to just kind of weather whatever your opponent's going to do, survive, kind of control the board to a degree, massive amounts of card advantage where possible, and just look for an opportunity for a win. But mostly it's like a boxer who's just kind of leaning back on the ropes and just taking the hits, like just trying to like, all right, let him tire himself out, let him use up his resources, and then through sheer advantage, overpower him, basically. So let's go through the cards now. All right, so here we have the deck and the sideboard. I figure we'll go through the deck first, as that makes more sense. The sideboard is just that. It's your side piece, your side action. So we'll take a look. I love the old school action of these cards. But anyways, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video about the whole, like, check out the quality of these. Check out the quality. Look, honestly, he's saying that these are worth $1 a piece. It's just, it's a piece of paper. Edwin, come on, man. That's what these are. He's so paranoid. Oh, hold on. Let me just slot this back in here. He's so paranoid about these being maybe considered real cards that he wrote proxy. He like printed proxy here on the card itself. Like how absurd a concept is that? Why would you do that? Why would you put proxy there? Anyways, I'm not going to spend forever ranting about this, but I laughed that he declared that this deck was worth $75. Who would pay $75 for some pieces of paper on top of basic lands, Edwin? Who? Anyways, Jamed Tome, what you got to understand when you're looking at this, and this is actually a mono artifact, so it taps to activate. You may look at it and go, oh, 4 to put out, pay 4 mana, draw a card. That's not too shabby, but it does have to tap. But in the old school days of Magic, this was fast enough. And the card advantage that you get over time, right? Because remember, this deck is all about just kind of laying on the ropes. If you were in a boxing match, you're just laying back on the ropes and just kind of trying to take the beats and survive in most cases. So that's this is good for the long term, right? And the artwork's pretty funky as well. I always thought that this looked like a pretty intimidating looking book. You've got like the demon eyes right there. You've got internal organ action. Like it's, when you look at it, this artwork's very, very dark. So how many copies do we get of that? We get to play with three Jamed Tomes, not too shabby at all. Then we've got Demonic Tutor. This card is restricted for very good reason. 1 black and 1. You may search your library for 1 card, put it into your hand, and then you shuffle your deck afterwards. I like how it says reshuffle. You know, it's like, yeah, you shuffle. They don't say reshuffle anymore, right? They just say shuffle because the extra letters cost them money and are unnecessary. And this is from the old days, back before they did the purge of all the demon cards. They got rid of them all because they wanted to have mass market appeal, and they were worried about like religious people getting upset about the game. So cards like this got the boot, but this card was already like way too powerful to begin with. So this is one of the restricted cards from the deck, of which there will be a bunch because that's how this works. We've got Balance is the next restricted card. This card is actually so strong. This is the first individual single Magic card I ever bought. I thought originally that I would never buy individual singles and that I would only ever buy booster packs. But because of the power level of this card, the first time I read it, I was like, I have to have this card. And I bought it from the store immediately. Funnily enough, I bought a $3 copy, and they had a $2 copy in the same box, but I didn't bother to go back far enough. That's how excited I was about the card. I was like, I have to have this right now. The artwork is admittedly kind of goofy. You just have like some knight in a weird winged helmet just standing out on the... We're going to measure it. Put your grapes on one side. I'll put my ducks on another. We'll see who has the most. Maybe your duck's a witch. Anyways, Balance, hilariously enough, is one of the most unbalanced cards in the game. Basically, it's... Well, you know what? Let's look at the old school wording. Whichever player has more lands in play must discard enough lands of his or her choice to equalize the number of lands both players have in play. Cards in hand and creatures in play must be equalized the same way. Creatures lost in this manner may not be regenerated. Basically, what it does is whoever has more lands has to sacrifice a number of lands until both players have an equal amount of lands. Same goes for creatures, and then cards in hand. Old school wording would say things like discard. Either way, this card is so hilariously unbalanced, it's gorgeous. Oh, then we've got Fireball. Okay, there's one Fireball in here. I don't know. Maybe the stuff's in a different order. I haven't really gone through the deck. So we've got Fireball. This is your old school burn spell. 1 and X, and you can actually split it up amongst extra targets. You pay an extra mana for every extra target you want to include in the spell, and then you divide X by the number of targets. So a lot of the time, you're generally just going to Fireball a player, but being able to smoke a creature and hit a player is nice. This is not too shabby to have in here. This is one of the more aggressive cards in the deck. A lot of the stuff is just going to be about surviving, right? Then you've got Recall. This is another restricted card, at least at the time that this deck was around. I don't know if it's still restricted. I imagine it probably is. This is a crazy blue regrowth effect. Normally you see these effects in green, but back in the day, blue had this. I love the old school wording. Sacrifice X cards from your hand. And they had discard lands from play on Balance. I'm glad they kind of codified it into one way of doing things where sacrificing is for things in play and cards in hand get discarded. So, discard X cards from your hand, return X target cards from your graveyard to your hand. And it's double X and 1 blue, and then this card gets exiled. This is pretty solid for getting back your crazy spells. Oh, speaking of crazy spells, oh man, I had all these. Like, these are flimsy proxy paper cards, but I actually had all of these cards back in the day. Not anymore, but back in the day I did. So Time Walk, 1 blue and 1, take an extra turn after this one with some really wonky art. The little weird, like, clay people walking down a path with pylons. This artwork has always been very, very weird and kind of abstract to me, but the card itself is insanely powerful. Obviously, only having to pay 2 mana. This is what happened when the game was originally designed. This was considered a fair cost for an extra turn. Sure, just 1 and a blue. It's just an extra turn. So insanely powerful. Speaking of insanely powerful, more of the Power 9 coming downtown. We've got Ancestral Recall. 1 blue at instant speed, target player draws 3 cards. I like the old school wording. Draw 3 cards or force opponent to draw 3 cards. I'm going to force you to draw cards. Draw them forcefully. I don't even need to explain to you how awesome this card is. Apparently this guy's having his head overloaded with powerful energy. I guess he's being forced. Remember your parents! No, I don't want to remember them. All right, then we've got another crazy piece of artwork. We've got Time Twister, where it looks like this guy is basically being unmade. It's pretty insane. Time Twisters, this was one of my favorite Power 9 cards. I actually played a deck with 4 copies of this. So this is 1 blue and 2, and what you do is everybody shuffles their hands and graveyards back into their deck and draws a new hand of 7 cards. Pretty sweet, man, and the artwork is really, really intense. I love this card. This is one of my favorite cards in all of Magic. Oh, Dirty Boy. Oh, yes, Mana Drain. This card's so strong, especially now that Mana Burn isn't a thing. This card was really strong when Mana Burn was a thing. 2 blue, counter target spell. At the beginning of your next main phase, you get X colorless mana, where X is the mana cost of the spell you countered. This thing is insane. I actually played with a playset of mana drains in a deck all the way back in 1994, and I felt so gross and dirty that at the end of the tournament that I won using them, I promptly got rid of them. This felt too strong to me. It's crazy to think back, obviously, like, what are you doing? You want to play the most powerful stuff, but it just felt so wrong. This card, obviously, it's not as big a deal as it used to be, but it was so crippling back then. People didn't play the same sort of, like, blisteringly powerful meta decks, so I did genuinely feel dirty playing with 4 mana drains. All right, we got another awesome restricted card. 1 green and 1 gets you regrowth, where you get to return target card from your graveyard to your hand. Straight up, very straightforward. And this right here, actually, I remember when it first dawned on me that if you had both of these cards, you could go on forever with your deck. And I was so pleased to discover that. I enjoy the discovery of Magic the Gathering. It is a lot of fun in that regard. All right, then we've got another dirty, dirty restricted card. Brain Geyser, 2 blue and X, draw X cards, or force opponent to draw X cards. This is great because it can be used to draw answers from your deck, or if you have an obtuse amount of mana, you can just use it to wipe your opponent out and make him draw his whole deck and lose. So this is both helpful defensively and offensively, which is also nice. You'll see that with a lot of cards. Fireball's the same kind of thing. Oh yeah, dude, the Abyss. This card is so busted. 1 black and 3. All players bury 1 target non-artifact creature under their control if they have any during their upkeep. I think this might have been updated to say sacrifice, but either way, this makes each player have to get rid of 1 of their creatures each turn. It doesn't affect artifact creatures, but as you may have noticed, this deck doesn't seem to be packing a lot of creatures. So this is going to eat up your opponent's creatures. This is an enchant world, which is very interesting to note because there can only ever be 1 enchant world. This is like legendary, but to the next step, where there can only be 1 of any given enchant world on the board, regardless of name. It was an interesting concept that they just kind of discontinued. So we have 2 copies of the Abyss. Then we've got another just dirty, dirty pool card here. This is Mind Twist. 1 black and X. Opponent discards X cards at random from their hand. This card, absolutely a backbreaker. If you can get it early with a bunch of mana, you can just decimate your opponent. The random discard is just brutal. If you've never played back in the day of Hymn to Turok and Mind Twist and things like that, you won't realize quite how gross random discard can be. But this is a brutal card. After that, we've got more discard. Again, bear in mind, mono artifact. You can only use it once a turn. 3 to put out, 3 and tap it. Opponent discards a card of their choice. And that's it. And you can only use this on your turn. So only, like, that's an okay card. There's just 1 in there. Once you get it out, it basically, if your opponent's hand is empty when you have a Disrupting Scepter out, then you can make sure they keep it empty because they're either going to have to cast their spells or you're going to make them pitch them each turn. Then we've got Chaos Orb. This is the weirdest card in the entire deck for sure, because this is one of the rare manual dexterity style cards that they only do inside of unsets now because of the absurdity of it. But it's 2 to put out, pay 1, then you hold this card a foot above the player, like the battlefield, and then you have to flip it so that it does at least 1 full rotation and is at least 1 foot above the table. I believe that's what it says. Must flip over from at least once, and it has to be at least 1 foot above. Yeah, so you have to do it from at least a foot above the table, and it has to completely flip 1 time for it to count. And any cards that it lands on and touches are destroyed. Hilariously enough, I only ever played with this in 1 tournament, and it landed on my own card. In fact, most of the time I saw Chaos Orbs fire off, it went very poorly. But that added an element of fun and crazy randomness. So this is a very entertaining card. I may transfer some of these proxies to my cube after we're done with this until I can get real copies. Then we've got your Swords to Plowshares. This is another very useful card in terms of there are a few creatures in the deck, so you can plowshare your own creature to keep you alive, or you can Plowshare your opponent's creature. So for 1 mana, you exile the creature from the game, and whoever owned the creature gained, or whoever controlled it, gains life equal to the creature's power. So this is like the old school, like better path to exile, right? A lot of people know Swords to Plowshares. So we've got, how many copies of Swords do we get? Unsurprised to see a full play set. That's how potent this card is right there. Deserves the respect of 4 slots. Then you've got Disenchant, 1 white and a colorless to destroy an enchantment or artifact. Pretty straightforward. We've seen Disenchant in a bunch of sets. Now there are 4 Disenchants here simply because there are a ton of amazing old artifacts and enchantments and things like that you'll want to get rid of. Then we've got counter spells. 2 blue, counter target spells it's being cast, which is obviously the only time you can counter it. But it's got this old artwork. Look at this doofy guy whose spell has been countered. Look at how shocked and dismayed he is. Oh my god, my spell. So how many counter spells do we get here? Oh, we get a full array of counter spells. Very nice, very nice. I don't really play counter spells when I'm playing casual Magic, but since Edwin wants to play with old school powerful decks, he basically whipped this one up for me, and this is what I'm going to go with. So we've got your Manlands, we got the Mishra's Factory. This taps for a colorless mana, or for 1 colorless mana becomes a 2/2 artifact assembly worker creature. And it also has the ability, these can tap to give each other +1/+1. And oh, did we get the full season set? Yes, we did. Very nice. All 4 seasons. So you got your fall, your winter, your spring, and your summer. Very cool, man. Very nice. Very nice. And then, oh, more power. God, Moxes are so dirty, honestly. So we've got the Mox Jet. These Moxes come out for 0 and tap for a mana of the color. And they don't even come to play tapped. This thing is nuts. You can ignore the part about it being played as an interrupt, because interrupt's an old card type that doesn't actually exist in Magic anymore. So we've got all the Moxes. This actually right here, Mox Emerald, is the first Mox I ever saw. I remember seeing it in the display case for $15 and thinking to myself, what kind of idiot would pay $15 for a forest? Oh, how the times change. So, rocking the camera in my Mox excitement here. So we've got all five of the Moxes, 1 for each color, looking all just, oh, they're so nice. Even though these are just Garbo printout paper versions, still very nice to look at. Then we've got your Sol Ring. This is just a busted card. 1 to put out, taps for 2 colorless mana, doesn't come into play tapped or anything, has amazing artwork where it looks like it is a ring that's literally been generated purely out of like the fire of the sun. That's so cool. So cool. Oh, and the Lotus, the dirty boy Lotus. 0 to put out, sacks for 3 mana of any color. This thing is so obtusely broken. It's just insane. It allows you to start out so powerfully. All right. And then we've got, is it all just basic lands from here? No, it's not. All right. Library of Alexandria. Why did I think it would be basic lands? It's going to be loaded with dual lands. Library of Alexandria. This card's really strong. It taps for colorless mana, or it lets you tap to draw a card, but you can only do that if you have exactly 7 cards in your hand. If you get this in your starting hand, you can run House where you get an extra card draw every single turn if things are done properly. This is such an insane card advantage engine that it's just mind-blowing. And keep in mind, old school Magic was very much about card advantage. So this is a house. Then we've got City of Brasses. We got a playset of City of Brass. So City of Brass is a land that taps for a mana of any color, but you take 1 damage. So it's like a souped up pain land. Then we've got your, oh, what? Oh my God, you can play more than 1 strip mine. What? When I played back in the old days, this was restricted. So this land taps for a colorless mana or sack it to destroy target land. Good Lord. Oh, and we got the different art variations. Very nice. Very nice. Oh, cool. That was unexpected. Oh, now we move into Duel Land territory. So we have, are there no creatures in this deck? Maybe they're in the sideboard. Okay, so we've got Tundras. So Tundras are your white-blue dual lands. You've got Volcanics, which red-blue. Underground is black-blue. And look at the way they do it in the borders, in the text box. It looks awesome. So you've got 2 Underground Seas, another Volcanic, and a random blue Elemental Blast that I guess probably should have been earlier. I don't know. Hold on. Let me count the sideboard. We'll see if that's part of the deck or the sideboard. That's part of the sideboard. Okay, so we'll cover that next. We will cover that next. Maybe this deck is the creatureless version. I'm used to a variation of this deck that runs Serra Angels. So I was expecting at some point to see Serra Angels, but it appears like there won't be any Serra Angels. So let's take a look at the sideboard. These are the things you can slot in depending on what you're playing against. You've got Ivory Tower. This was restricted back in the day, probably still is. 1 to put out. During your upkeep, gain 1 life for each card in your hand above 4. I remember playing this in control decks and riding it out for insane amounts of life. Like, this over time gives you so much value in life, and it can just, basically, this just ends a red rush at your face deck, where basically, if you have a hand of 7 cards, then you'll be gaining 3 life a turn. So you're canceling out a lightning bolt every turn. And if you actually have the Library of Alexandria, if before your turn you activate it, you draw a card, you have 8 cards, you'll be gaining 4 life a turn from this. So Ivory Tower, really solid sideboard action. What? City in a Bottle? What? There's that much Arabian Nights that this is worth being in the sideboard? Crazy. So it's 2 to put out. All cards from Arabian Nights must be discarded from play, except for City in a Bottle. And while City in a Bottle is in play, no further cards from Arabian Nights can be played. So anything with an Arabian Nights expansion symbol gets destroyed, and nothing with an Arabian Nights expansion symbol can be played. That is an interesting include. Now we have the Black Vice. This is the opposite of the Ivory Tower, essentially, but on your opponent, where they take a damage for every card they have in their hand above 4. This is great for an opponent who either draws a lot of cards or is just kind of hosed for lands. Like if somebody doesn't draw enough lands and you can hit them with the Strip Mine or 2 and really stymie them, the Black Vice, this will do its business. If you're going first in a match, basically if I play a Black Vice on you on my first turn, you're going to take 3 damage on your very first turn. So unless you have an explosive start to respond to it, you can just wither and die under a Black Vice. I've seen it happen a number of times to me and other players. So you got 2 of those. Then we've got Dust to Dust, 2 white and 1, remove 2 target artifacts from the game. All right, so this is just like some heavy artifact destruction hate, and there's a number of those. You've got your red Elemental Blast. This is 1 red to counter a blue spell or destroy a blue permanent. Very solid, great for counterspell wars. So we got 3 copies, I should say, of those. Then we've got Divine Offering, which is more artifact destruction. This is 1 white and 1 to destroy an artifact and gain life equal to the casting cost of that artifact. This is a lot of artifact hate. And then we have Circle Red. Let's see here. Okay, so we've got 1 Circle Red. And this is an enchantment that sits in play, and for 1 colorless can prevent all damage from a red source. So this completely ends a red burn deck, basically. It's pretty much impossible to get around a Circle of Protection red. That's pretty intense. And then you have some more red hate in terms of the blue Elemental Blasts, which are the opposite of the red ones. They counter a red spell that's being cast or destroy a red card in play. And you can see, like, on the artwork there, the 2 different mages doing similar sort of maneuvers with their elements. It's very cool. You've got like the blue divided by red on this side and the red divided by blue kind of effect. They're very nice companion pieces. I appreciate them quite a bit. So that thus ends laking the deck. Taking a look at the deck, let us hand it back over to the version where you can see my ridiculous face on the screen. All right, well, I gotta say, man, that was an awesome trip through some really nostalgic cards for me, and I remember playing with a ton of that stuff. So playing this deck should come fairly easily to me. Now, obviously, Edwin's gonna have an advantage in our match-off since he knows exactly what I'm playing and can pick something tuned to it. I have no ability really to change the deck or do anything else, but that's fine because we're just going to have a fun little tussle. It's all good. And I imagine most likely it will end up being recorded and put up on his channel. There's actually a couple of interviews with me over on his channel and some other stuff too. So I've already hung out with Edwin before. We'll be doing it again. He'll be happy to see this video's up because I know he's excited about me getting the deck. I already emailed him about it, but this video will make sure as well that he knows. So thanks for coming by, everybody. What did you like about this deck? Is this your style of deck? Anything that you would change? Do you recognize this stuff? Or are you one of those new whippersnappers who are younger than the cards that I own? What's the deal? Let me know in the comments below. Big thank you to my patrons and channel members for supporting what I do here. It does mean a lot to me and allows me to do what I'm doing. So thanks for coming by, and I shall see all of you guys tomorrow.